Welcome to the North Sails Loft 57 podcast. I'm your guest host, Charlie Enright, not Ken Reed. And for the first few episodes of the podcast, we'll be doing a deep dive into the Vendee Globe. Known as the Everest of the Seas, this extraordinary event that happens every 4 years is truly one of the most unique competitions in all of sport. Racing around the world solo, nonstop and without assistance, takes a certain type of sailor. Maybe a little mad, certainly very brave and skilled, and without doubt determined. Over 10 editions, the race has delivered incredible drama, stories of human endeavor, as well as tragedy and heartbreak. You can't underestimate how huge this event is in France. Taxi drivers in Paris will know the names of all the skippers. Millions of people make the pilgrimage to La Sable d'Olonne to walk the docks before the start, and half the country will follow the action at sea. Our goal with this series of episodes is to get under the skin of this special event. And, as is always the case with North Sails, we have access to some of the biggest names and characters involved in the Vendee Globe, and we'll focus in particular on the technology and innovation at the heart of the racing. The next two episodes will preview the event, which starts on November 10th, and I'll be speaking to sailmakers, shore managers, journalists, and other leaders who make this event all that it is. Then, once the racing's underway, our goal is to speak to the skippers at sea and take you into the heart of the action. We're kicking off our conversations by speaking to two of the top people at IMOCA, the class association managing the boats that compete in the Vendee Globe. I'll also be speaking to Dave Reed, editor of Sailing World magazine, for an international perspective. And finally, I chat to my good friend Pascal Bidegorry, one of the biggest characters in the world of French sailing and someone who's never shy of an opinion. But first up, a talk with Antoine Mermod, the IMOCA class president, and his colleague, Imogen Dinam Price, sustainability manager for the class, to give us a big picture perspective on this iconic race. Maybe we can kick off with Antoine here. And Antoine, you can tell us a little bit about the Vendee Globe holistically. I mean, it's reached mythical status in France, and it's kind of on par with international events like the Tour de France. Can you tell people from around the world, how do you explain the passion for this event? And it really does go beyond sailing?
Yeah, actually, the Vendee Globe is very, very famous in France. Just few datas, but in France, there are 65 million of people. And on the last Vendee Globe, it was more than half of the French that followed the race, which is more than 30 million people that makes this race very, very famous in France. Actually, why that? It's now the 10th edition that has started in 89, and every edition makes a huge stories with a lot of drama that makes this race very, very popular in France since then. And it's a round the world race, single-handed. And in France, the culture of people are very focused on short-handed sailing, and maybe that's why it's so famous in France.
Can you talk about half the French population, following this race? And I know there's a lot of sailors in France, but clearly it appeals to non-sailors as well. Maybe you can just give us a quick summary of the race's history, the initial idea that got it off the ground, and then kind of how we got to where we are today, which is with a packed starting line of 40 boats coming up this November.
Yeah, that has started in 89, but actually it was 3 years before that 3 or 4 skippers racing the BOC Challenge. That was a round the world race, single-handed, but with 5 legs. At the stopover in South Africa, they discussed together and they say, maybe it was, why not doing it without stop? And that idea moved forward, and it was the start of the Vendee Globe that at the end happened in 89. And no one knows where this skipper go, if they will finish the race, how to prepare such a race. It was a huge adventure, and at the end, that works not so bad. It was 13 skippers that starts in November 89, and I think it was 7 that finish. And since then, every 4 years, we've got this race that is no more than an adventure. It's now a huge sport with very high level sailing that boat that the fastest boat, oceanic boat with foil can compete.
It's a race that's packed with not only sailing stories, but stories around the human spirit. It has ups and it's got downs. I mean, what are some of the big moments over the last couple editions that stick out for you personally on the human side?
On the human side, the last edition in 2020, the boat of Kevin Escoffier that sank, and Kevin has to jump in the life raft. But unfortunately, we had an issue with the beacon. And for a few hours, actually, no one knows where Kevin was and if he was in the life raft and what's really the situation. And after 12 or 15 hours, something like that, Jean Le Cam managed to find it. And that was a huge emotion everywhere in the sailing community, and especially in France, because it was very close to a big drama. Many years before, maybe I can remember the race in 96. That was a very tough race, actually, because we lost two skippers. One was Jerry Roof, and another one was Nigel Burgess, a few hours after the start for Nigel Burgess and Jerry Roof in the south. And also at this race, just delivering his boat from US to Europe, Mike Plant had an accident during the delivery. And that was an edition in which, including my plant, 3 skipper missed. That makes also, that was a very tough time also for the race and for the oceanic world at that time. But definitively sailing so far away and such a long time, it's a lot of risk, and sometimes we've got a few accidents. But in my memory, that's the two worst time that happened in this race.
You know, the race is obviously very difficult, as we just discussed, but so is the journey to the starting line. I mean, it's difficult to secure sponsorship, secure the boat. The preparation is difficult. It's difficult even to qualify. I mean, there's 40 skippers on the starting line, and there's even more that want to compete. Can you, as class guardians, maybe one more for Antoine, and then we'll move over to Imogen. Can you tell us just how that process works and how you guys have managed to be so successful in the sponsorship market?
Yeah, actually, it's a 4-year process. And during these 4 years, we've got many races. Maybe it's something like 4 or 5 years. At the end, it's 18 races that happened the last 4 years. And at each races, the skippers have they've got mile. If you are sailing a 300-mile race, then you've got 300 miles at your to qualify the Vendée Globe. And this process push the skippers to sail most of the race, or all the race, or the more possible races. That makes that they are very well prepared in sport-wise, but also that helps a lot to make the boat much more reliable. And for the business, it's very positive, because each race we are doing, it's a lot of participants. That makes that it's also a huge interest for the fan. But it's a very long process, very tough, and as you say, you know, the journey to be at the start is the first big victory for all the participants.
And certainly one of the big sponsorship properties here moving forward, or, you know, in recent history, shall we say, has been this concept of sustainability. And, you know, oftentimes when we think about sustainability, we think about the health of the planet and the health of the earth and the oceans and our entire ecosystem. But what's also important, I think, is social sustainability. And I think the class has done a very good job with that. And in this particular edition of the race, we have a diverse group on the starting line, and that includes men, it includes women, it includes people from all different nationalities outside of France. I know the I in IMOCA stands for international, but still a lot of these sailors are from France. But Imogen, maybe you can tell us just a little bit about the makeup of the fleet and some of the strides that the class has made on the social side.
Yeah, completely. So yeah, just as you were saying, this year we're going to have 6 women competing during the Vendee Globe, 2 of which are probably going to be or maybe a few more competing for the podium positions. So it's going to be a great competitive fleet. We have today over 11 different nationalities within the IMOCA class. So yeah, it does really touch upon this international aspect. And they're not just, a lot of them, of course, are in France, but there are projects all over the place. And so it's really nice to have that diverse cultural fleets. And we're also, it's not just a class which relies on sole competition where we have to be of a certain physique. We're also seeing people coming through who've been in Paralympics before. So there are Damien Sangan is a great example. He's going around the world. He'll be going around the world with just one arm as well. He's been Paralympic class before, and we've also got one of our skippers, another skipper who will be in the same position as him as well. So it's going to be really interesting to watch all that diversity. But from the class's perspective as well, we work on the social elements. We've given ourselves a real challenge this year, really to work with the Magenta project to encourage more women to come into offshore racing, but also to remain in offshore racing. So we've put in place the first female leadership development program, whereby our teams, not just the skippers, working with women to keep them in the shore team, so to look for team manager positions, technical director positions, and of course skipper positions. Today we see that we've got at least 50% of women who are in team manager positions within the class. That's a real great success. But there are areas where we also need to boost, like in technical director positions, to have a few more women coming through. So this female development leadership program is really going to help with that. So that's just one aspect that we're working on with the Magenta project, and we hope that in the next few years we can also go a little bit further.
Other steps that the class has been making really revolve around technology. I mean, it's at the heart of the class. It's a value here that's shared at North Sails. What have the biggest technological advancements been in the class since the last race, Antoine?
Actually, it's a rule named carbon cap. I don't know if it's the right word in English, but the point is that we did a life cycle analysis on each boat of from 2020 to 2024. That makes that we study 13 boats around their building. That makes that now we've got a lot of data about the impact of the building of a boat, and for the next for the next campaign, that means from now to 2028, all the new boats will have to match a limit of carbon impact, which has to be the average, the one that has been measured less 15%. That means that we will decrease the impact of the boat of 15% for the next 4 years, which is it's a number, but actually it's a huge job that is made now by the designer and by the builder to match this new rule. And that makes that they have to invent a new way of building. They have to use new material. They have to be very careful about the design. And actually, it's only a small number, but the impact is really huge in our industry. And that's something we are making in very close partnership with designer and builders. And I think it's very powerful because it's maybe in a mechanical sport the first time in which the impact is really part of the game and part of the rules to reach the performance.
That's a really good point. I think progress definitely has a price or an impact, as you're alluding to, and I think a consciousness around that and a concerted effort to curb it has been a great step, certainly by the IMOCA class. And we think of it in terms of construction. It can be materials, but it can also be how the materials are used. It can be process. It could be supply chain. So I think, before we change, we have to know where the impacts are. And I think the class has really done an amazing job with that. And, Imogen, maybe you can speak to the work that North Sails and the IMOCA class more specifically have done with the RISE program to create more sustainable sails. Can you take us inside that initiative and just what the goals are and kind of how it works?
So RISE is in some respect quite similar to our carbon cap impact reduction rule, where we did need to know and understand what we were working with. So really working to understand our baseline reference, which would allow us to be able to put in place and implement a strategy, was really important. So just like the impact reduction carbon cap rule, we did LCA, so life cycle assessment on sails, and this was in partnership and collaboration with 5 of the IMOCA sail makers, so North Sails included, and this allowed us to really understand what was the impact of sail manufacturing. It highlighted 3 areas of impact, and this was from waste, energy, and transport. And so we got going with this project in 2021, and it was by 2023 that we were able to put in place a rule, which was at first called Green Sails, and now it has progressed to RISE, which is Reduced Impact Sail Evaluation. And it's allowed us to really work on all of these impact areas. And the IMOCA class then put in place a rule which allowed all of the boats, they had to have one of these RISE sails on board. So all the boats you're going to see going off around the Vendée Globe in the next few weeks will have one RISE sail or lower impact sail on board the boats. And this has been a real collaboration with all of the 5 different sail makers that we've got on board. And currently we're looking to go a little bit further with this rule, so that we're going to we're in the process of making a certification. So it's going to be a real certifiable system that we can send out to the sailing community, and it won't just stay within IMOCA. So we're in the final stages of this trial period, where we're going to be pushing the impact reduction even further, so the sail makers, apologies North, might have to work a little harder, like all the others, to go further to reduce their impact. But they're all behind it, and it was really the sail makers which pushed this. They wanted to go further. They thought it was great, the first step, but they wanted to push this dynamic a little bit further. So that's why we're working towards this certifiable system and scheme for the sailing community.
Sounds like you guys have done a really good job and taken a holistic approach on this whole thing. So congratulations, and look forward to what the future might hold for this project. We're kind of running short on time here, so maybe we can kind of get back to the Vendée Globe and kind of what you guys expect. How many people in Les Sables alone, and what can we expect more specifically from the Race Village experience? I think that's a question for either of you, really. I'll let you decide.
It's maybe 2 million people that will come during this 3 weeks there, and the day of the start we are expecting maybe 300,000 or 300,050 people at the start, and that will be a huge event. I think it's in France it's the biggest event in terms of number of people in the same day, because between 300,000 and 400,000 it's huge, and it's a huge organization there to make it happen well. Just cross the finger that the weather is with us, because in France we are North Hemisphere, and 10th of November it's the start of winter. Not winter, but it could be tough day. But let's say that it will be a nice day. I hope so.
All right, and finally, for those listeners not in France, from other parts of the world, how would you recommend we follow the action? I'm used to being tracked, not looking at a tracker, but I'll have to change my modus operandi. What do you guys think the best way to follow the race is?
I think the website of the Vendée Globe and all the social media from the Vendée Globe will be for 3 months online on the live will be on the race will be on live on it, and also to go on each skipper's website or social media. You could follow very closely the race, and every day at noon French time you've got a 1 hour live show in which a few people are describing what's happening during the day. which is maybe the highlight of the day. And I think you can access from the website of the Vendée Globe.
All right, Imogen, as an IMOCA insider, what's one story that you're looking forward to in this next edition of the race that maybe people aren't talking about publicly?
I think one of the stories, well, it's now public, I think, but it's going to definitely be from the sustainability side, the scientific work that IMOCA, UNESCO, and the Vendée Globe are carrying out. So there will be a lot of skippers for the first time. We're going to have over 50% of our fleet, which will be collecting scientific data for UNESCO. And so it'll be really brilliant to check out which skippers are going to be collecting data and looking into the scientific and helping the scientific community with that. So it's not necessarily racing completely, but it's the more sustainability side, which could be quite interesting to some.
That seems like a pretty good place to end it. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your time, and I'm sure you have plenty of things to get back into with the start of the Vendée Globe just around the corner. But thanks again very much, and look forward to watching the racing.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
It was fantastic to get some insight from two leaders at the heart of solo offshore racing. Next up, I connected with Dave Reed, longtime editor of Sailing World magazine in the US, to get an international perspective on this iconic race. All right, Dave, with the Vendée fast approaching, what's your view on this race, which is so big in France, yet perhaps not on the radar for many American readers?
If this is that race that it's crazy to me that is not on the radar of most American readers. And I think, right, as we know over the years, it being a French dominated thing, and we always kind of hope for more and more some of the the English sailors, so we can understand what's coming off the boat and kind of engage with them and follow the race. But what's cool to me is it's because you have these giant gaps in time between races, it sort of fades away, and then all of a sudden it's happening, and you kind of got to scramble to kind of find out who's who and their whole backstory. And then once you start digging into it, it's fascinating to me, and that's what I love about it, because just the variety of people, and there's always those who want to finish and those who want to win and those who just want the experience, and they all come with their own story. And so I think our goal is to just, it's hard to engage an audience and get them excited about it until something actually starts to happen. And so the start is always a good way to start up and tell their stories.
All right. Well, I mean, you followed this race for a long time. Like, what are some of the most compelling stories that you remember as a fan? Like, what stands out to you?
I've always had this fascination for the solo sailors, right? And I think some of it was a little bit go way back, was sparked by in our middle school here in Newport, there was a woman who started a pen pal program for the O-Star race, the one that goes from England to Newport. And and I connected with this guy as a kid. And to me, since then, I've always been fascinated by the whole thing. And I never got into it, but I did finally get a little taste of it when I did the Chicago Mac race a few years on a Seascape 27 double-handed, which, the off-watch kind of rhythm gave me that sense of this is cool. And that race sort of opened my eyes to just sailing at night by myself, and just it even gave me a greater appreciation for it. But to that point, I think last year with Charlie Dallin, he's to me is just a superstar, and I've always been fascinated by his story. And we did an interview between kind of a linked one similar to this with myself and Jonathan McKee and Charlie, and just to hear the two of them talk to each other in the level of details and the backstories and the time they've I don't know if you know this backstory, but basically Charlie showed up at Jonathan's McKee's mini transat program to help him on the shore crew. And they have this whole long backstory that goes back, but it just shows how long these campaigns go and how long the path these guys and women take to get to into this race and be able to go do it. So he's my current favorite, as is, I guess, is the race favorite as well.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a machine.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of sailing with and against the man, and it's hard to find a lot of fault in his game. He's super competitive. He's super focused. At this point, super experienced. It's funny, he has an attention to detail, but what I think he does really well is he's got good perspective. He knows what's important and what's not important, where to focus his energy, where to take a risk, where to lay up. He's very, very methodical and very, very thoughtful. He's a trained naval architect too. So he actually worked. It's funny. We did a partnership with Merconcept during the ocean race, and we did a lot of training with the PVA, some data sharing, and a lot of sailing on each other's boats. And Ben Wright, who's our short team manager, who ran Ericsson a million years ago, remembers when Charlie was like a little CAD kid in the design office, 10 years earlier. I mean, he's been at it for a long time, and I also had the pleasure of sailing with Jeremy Bayou, who's a perennial favorite. Tom Riant and Sam Goodchild have a good thing going with their two boats. Kat Peprek, Boris Sermon, Sam Davies, Justine. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it really is very, very deep this year. And there are some stories at the top, like we just said. But what's pretty cool is how there's fleets within fleets, and there's always the race within the race. Who's going to be the top 2020 generation boat, who's going to be the top 2016 generation boat, and then what does that mean for their next campaign, and what kind of sponsorship they can get their hands on. And you got the displacement boats, and you end up with splits in the fleet with different weather. I mean, there's just always so much to follow, and I find it totally fascinating. I mean, what do you think about 40 boats? Do you think that's too many? You think from a commercial standpoint some boats are getting drowned out?
No, I think if you focus too much on the results, maybe, but again, I guess this is more about, right, as your own experience, the adventures and the inspiration and all the stuff. So I think that it's always been, you look at some of the sponsors that all these boats bring, and they carry on to the companies and then to the employees that rally around the sponsored sailor and things like that. So I think from the results alone, maybe it's because they get spread out, it changes the story, but I think the story just grows wider through the larger fleet and the larger fan base.
I mean, I think that's totally true. I mean, I think it's, as are most things, it's a results driven business. But there's different, ways to measure that. There's obviously the leaderboard, but then in this new world of social media and digitized, basically everything on the internet can be quantified. So, people are being measured ways that they've never really been measured before. So it's pretty interesting. What's also interesting is, we talked about the class trying to become a little bit more international. I mean, is there anybody here domestically that you see with Vendée Globe aspirations that we should kind of be on the lookout for?
I don't know. That's been the question on all of our heads forever, right? It's when I got a picture hanging next to me of a race I did back with Brad Van Loo, Tommy Hilfiger, and he's like, man, legends back in the day of, guys like him not being able to progress to the top is just so crazy.
Yeah. It's interesting. Within France, there's this framework. There's this built-in pathway. We touched on it a bit before. It's it's the Mini Transat, it's the Figaro, it's the Class 40, it's the Ocean 50, the IMOCA, the Ultime, blah 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 blah. And there are guys and gals that slug it out in the Figaro for 10 to 15 years before they get their big opportunity. And then you kind of have the fringe, what I'll call like fringe international entries, whether it's Alex Thompson or Boris or folks that don't come from this grow up sailing single-handed, doing 5-6 knots, couple 100 miles from shore. And then you got these other folks that come in, learning on the Vendée Globe stage and kind of growing up right before everybody's very eyes. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, if an American chooses to embed themselves, in a system that's proven for trying to get to the top of the Vendée Globe, or they kind of take the outside approach and kind of learn on the fly. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few right in this fleet that have come through the path of being, embedded in the camp, as you say, just to get a hand in it and maybe for us, that's the easiest pathway forward is just get over there, get engaged, get on the team, and take it from there. Rather than, since we don't have the circuits to build up to the, to get to that level here, you just got to go work the campaigns.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like domestically there's a bunch of different groups. There's these pockets, in different locations trying to get something similar off the ground. Perhaps with some all-encompassing collaboration, we can make the domestic network a little bit stronger. But yeah, it's interesting to see, because I think there's definitely some groundswell, but we need to we need to light the fire. That's for sure. But then that's kind of the adventure side of it, right? So let's just change gears for a second. I mean, with the IMOCAs more specifically, you have these cutting edge technologies. Like, what's your opinion on that? Foiling offshore, foiling single handed. Like we talked about before, how much is too much, and where do you kind of see it all going?
It reminds me off topic. It's sort of like, let's go back to your ocean race experience, the most recent one that you had a humdinger of a race. That first leg with this old 65s, you had you guys in the boats that you're inside and pushing the boats hard, really kind of sailing it simulator style, right? Versus the 65s that people just being old school miserable, right?
Yeah.
And but the storytelling was so compelling from two different ways of a more technical style sailing that you do versus the old style suffer through and get the experience style of the 65s. And to me, both were amazingly fascinating. And sometimes like, wow, the 65 part was cool as well. And so I look at this fleet, when you got the daggerboard boats and the old boats, but the excitement is there in those, but there's also, that when you look at the tours of the modern boats, when you're inside and being able to handle the boat fully protected and sailing more efficiently and fast is really cool. And I think that, that also allows more material to come off the boat, right? With the Starlink satellites and more storytelling. And so I think we may be at that time where the storytelling and engaging the audience is almost more important than the results. Can you tell more stories from when you're spending less time getting beat up? Yeah, getting pummeled. And so that's probably a good thing, right? Is the technology pushes it, the faster our attention spans are shorter. So this race could be completed faster and you bookend it in a less amount of time and keep the audience engaged start to finish in a better way. But then at the back of the fleet, you've got the great storytelling of those still suffering the old school fun way.
Yeah, like we kind of discussed before, it's you're always pushing it 100%, and 100% can be holding onto a pedestal on deck, getting pummeled by waves, or it can be getting shook, rattled, and rolled, inside a space capsule of a cockpit, going 25 to 35 knots in a pretty gruesome sea state.
Both have their fun.
Yeah, exactly. You're always on the limit of what the human body can handle, and certainly that looks different on different platforms, particularly as it relates to ocean racing. But the foils are an interesting one because when you're sailing close-winded, there's a lot of slamming. The boats are going faster than the wave period, and it's like boom, 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 boom. And when you're off the wind, there's a lot of stop-start. You can't fly over the waves, and how you deal with jumping from one to the next, I think is going to be a big part of the results here in this next one. So, there's talk of putting elevators on the IMOCA moving forward. I think nobody's ever seen a plane without a tail fin, so it would make sense because as it stands today, it's like a seesaw. There's one fulcrum. There's just a foil in the middle of the boat, and it's hard to make that work. Consistently, they do a nice job displacing the weight of the boat, so at any given time, the water is only seeing or feeling, if you will, 10 to 30% of a boat that weighs around 8 tons. And so that's what allows them to achieve these huge speeds. But it's more about the averages and like, how do you manage the averages with the self-degradation of the foils themselves? Is it through rate? Is it through, immersion? It'd be interesting to see. And then like we talked about before, so you put an elevator on so the boats are capable of touching 40 every now and then. But then when you're one person in the Southern Ocean for 40 days, you're throttled back going 18. There's not a lot of flying going on around down there anyway. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and I guess, the fundamental thing, right, is the reliability. So, I mean, at some point, as you overcomplicate the whole machine, right, then it becomes about just the ability to finish or not. And so as we saw with the amount of breakages in the last race and versus the number of standard old school daggerboard boats that finished, albeit slower, still better to finish than to have to abandon the boat mid-ocean or just pull the plug. So, I guess that's the trade-off of getting over tech is the reliability part.
I mean, I think the fact that there's 40 boats doing this race, speaks to the success of the class. And it is the world's fastest offshore monohull. And, they seem to do a really nice job adopting new technologies, but making sure they don't ostracize the older generations within the class. It's by and large a democracy, and people always vote in their own self-interest, but somehow they've done a really nice job moving the class forward, but not forgetting where it came from, and some of it's more old. It's cool. It's cool to see.
Yeah, I think like as you look at the entries, the number of boats built almost 20 years ago, to me is insane. 2007 vintage boats, to me, that that they're still able to do a lap like this to be the launch pad for the next campaign. It has to be that way. It can't they can't all go around in the latest and greatest.
All right. Well, having said all that, what's one storyline that you think is most compelling? What are you going to be watching for here when these boats take off on November 10th?
I guess it is a time and place, but I still, I look at the women's fleet, and I still think we're in this great moment for women sailing. We could see it happening in Barcelona with the Women's America's Cup, which I think actually people engaged and cared more about than the cup itself. And I'm just saying, but I think the excitement on the ground there was true, and the year that women have had in sailing, and the fact that you've got Pip and Sam and then Isabella, these women have been doing it for so long and going at it. And then I've never met her, but this Violet, I believe is her name.
Yeah.
22. I mean, it's like 22, 18. It was almost like 4 or 5 years ago. She was doing the 420 Worlds, right? And that is crazy and inspirational as well. So I'm actually fascinated to see this continue to grow. And I think it's quite cool. And then the true battle at the top of the fleet, to me, is exciting to see whether Charlie can pull it off for real this time and take away the math and the sort of odd finish to the last race. But those would be my two storylines. So the women emerging out of this thing, and who's going to come out of the top 10.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, I think Clarice is the fastest woman around the world from her last Vendée, her last lap at Planet on Bank Populaire.
That's correct. Yeah, forget about Clarice, and then Justine, who you know well too, is we did a feature on her because I think she's you know her best, and
she is an absolute machine is the word. We used to joke that she doesn't actually sleep when she's down below; she just plugs in. She's like a little bit of a bot. She's an excellent teammate. She's earned every inch. She's a remarkable sailor. She's super disciplined. I just I can't say enough good things about her. Certainly, I have a lot of other lady friends in the fleet, but I'd love to see Justine hit it out of the park. That's for sure. And then I guess the last question, which I think you answered, is who do you think is going to win this thing?
I'll put my money on Charlie. Not just because he's another Charlie, but
yeah. You taking it to Vegas? Taking it to Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, you just look at his record. You start there at the baseline, right? But also just the efficiency that he's had, and just it's almost no reason not you're putting money on him. But how about you?
Yeah, I think his track record speaks for itself. I'm a little worried about his boat relative to the other boats in the South. It's got really straight lines. I think in flat water, I think a little bit more close winded. I think if he can keep his bow up, he's crushing. But I mean, you see upwind. I mean, at 60 true, he's like knots faster than people. But then downwind in a big sea state, hopefully he's got that all figured out. But there's a lot of I spent so much time over there. I mean, I have really fond relationships with a lot of these folks, and it's tough to pick. I think what's cool is, like we said before, I think 10 to 15 people can win this thing, which is pretty sweet.
Is it a matter of for some of the troops to, as same with any race, right? Sort of getting enough padding enough through the first phase to then throttle back through Southern Ocean, and then send it right on the final upwind leg.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Pascal in an earlier episode, and he used to joke it's a race to Cape Town, a cruise to Cape Horn, and then a race back to France. And
right.
There's some truth to that. I mean, I think that you got to stay on the same weather system. in the south. I think as fast as these boats are, they only go as fast as the weather allows them to go. So I think there are some inherent resets if, the group can't all stay in the same weather system. You got to push hard enough to stay in front of it. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, to finish first, you must first finish. And you got to be, I think we saw a couple different lead changes from Cape Horn to the finish, maybe some just in the Bay of Biscay before they got to La Sabre. So, I expect a nail biter for sure.
Well, I'm excited for, we're in the content game, right? Of everything that of more coming off. And this is all thing of just, it gives us the chance to spread more and put more out there and to keep the beat going as it goes. So, I'm looking forward to the storytelling as it goes along.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to following it and hopefully some of it with you along the way. So, Dave, thank you very much for your time, fresh back from Barcelona. And we'll all be hunkered down watching this next race here in the coming weeks. Sounds good, my man. I'll catch you later.
Okay, check it.
Next up, my conversation with Pascal Bidegorry, the one and the only. He's raced across the Atlantic over 30 times, 5 with me, seemingly. Raced around the world in the Volvo and has set records in many classes, including the biggest trimaran, Banque Populaire. He's also won the Solitaire de Figaro, the Transact Jacques Fabre, as well as several championships in the Orma, IMOCA, and Mod 70 circuits. Not to mention having multiple French and World Championship titles under his belt. He has a fantastic perspective on racing, of this event especially, and he's never shy to offer up an opinion. Pascal, first up, how come we're not seeing you on the starting line of the Vendée Globe? Is it because these boats are too small and too slow? What's going on?
Well, I don't know. Vendée Globe, for me, it's a long story. I was able to do it since a long time, and at the end, it was not the case. So that's life. It's because also I've done plenty of things during the Vendée Globe, the ocean race, saving a lot of time in big materials. So sometimes you have to choose, and sometimes the life is a choice for you. So that's why I'm not at the start of the Vendée Globe, and I think for the future it's going to be more and more difficult now.
Yeah, but looking at a guy like Jean Lecam, I mean, there's always hope, I think you doing the Vendée Globe would be a gift to the country of France. That's my opinion.
Well, we will see. There is only one Jean Lecam in our life, huh?
That is very true. So maybe that's a good segue. Aside from being totally crazy, what attracts these sailors to compete in the race? I mean, it's hard to get to the start line, it's hard to finish, and even harder to win. What drives these sailors?
But in France is a bit strange or different maybe of Anglo-Saxon culture. We sail a lot with the mini transat, with the Solitaire de Figaro, so we have a big culture of sailing alone on different rails and different supports. So and after the Figaro, the step after is to turn around the planet alone on IMOCA. So I think that's why I think there is plenty of French people, and not only today, but at the start it was something very French because it was our French culture. Eric Tabarly, it's our French culture. Anglo-Saxon culture is more around with bread, ocean race, and America's Cup.
You've worked with so many IMOCA teams, with 11th Hour Racing, Apivia, Holcim, Matricock. Like, what are the biggest factors that determine success? Is it the overall campaign? Is it the boat? Is it the perspective? Is it the sails, the foils? What makes a successful campaign?
There is plenty of things. I think first time is really important, and if you are able to manage time, it's because you are able to manage money. When you have money early in the campaign, it's not necessary to have plenty of money. That's why that's not what I want to say. But I think the first thing is really important is to be able to start early in the campaign, to be able to improve everything around the boat, and and to be able to have something is quite efficient about the way to finish the race. It's stupid what I said, but if you want to win, you have to finish first. So, of course, especially in this project and maybe a little bit also in your team, you think all the time about performance to improve about sail, about fuel, about stability of the boat, flying way, and everything around that. But you have also to think that you have to finish, and sometimes also you have to finish in a way that the boat is not 100%, but you have to find a good balance about performance and the way to arrive until the finish line.
So do you think that this next Vendée Globe will be won in the Southern Ocean?
I think it's not only the south. Yes, for sure, the south now I think is important because it's a long time during the Vendée Globe. It's 1 month in the south. We have made that during the Volvo Ocean race, both, so we know that it's a long way and it's not easy. And sometimes everything is quite okay, and you have a big gust is arrive and big cloud, and in 10 minutes you can break. You have a big problem on board, and after the story is not the same. So yes, for sure the south is important, but I think all the guys at one moment in the south alone they have to manage.
I think the important thing in the South is being able to stay in the same weather system as the leaders. As fast as the boats are, they can only go as fast as the wind. So it's a constant battle of pushing when you need to push and maybe stepping off the gas when you need to survive and live to fight another day, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's not necessary to push because your gain at the end is quite the same. So it's all about strategy. Sometimes you have to push and to be able to do a break and a big gap, and sometimes it's not necessary. But we are racing guys, and all these guys we want to win. They are also in this mode, and sometimes it's not difficult. Sometimes not to push.
Yeah,
you want to push all the time. So, that's the big trouble to manage during this long race.
And you mentioned this before, but there are probably more boats that can win this Vendée Globe than any Vendée Globe before. How many of the boats do you think can win out of the 40?
Well, I don't want to say a small number because I think there is maybe 10 guys who are able to win this race. I remember last time Yannick Tannen was not on the top of the list, and he right to do it because he sailed well, because he have done a very, very nice south. He pushed a lot with his old boat because it was not totally a new boat. He was not using big foil, but sometimes he arrived also with a boat. Maybe was problem with sail on board, but the boat was quite efficient and close to 100% of the performance until the end. So, he was not, I think, on the top of the list, and he rushed to do it. So maybe we can have surprise. I think there is 5, 6, maybe 7 guys who are able, for sure, they are favorite for the final ranking.
And then you see a boat like Boris Herman's boat. And that is a boat that can go very, very well in the South, but maybe isn't the best boat for a transatlantic. And so I agree. It's going to be very, very interesting. So
Boris is a good. Honestly, they have worked a lot the last years and last maybe 2 years. They have improved a lot about how they use the boat. Even is not a strong condition in long-wind mode, and. Remember the last 2 transat solo transats they have made, Ostar and the transat to come back from New York. These 2 transats is finished second. So I think is necessary on the paper. Maybe is not the fastest boat, but they have made a very good job on his boat.
Yeah, it could be very interesting to see someone not from France win the Vendée Globe, but we shall see. We shall see. I guess my question is this. Do you think the record will be broken? The record of Armel Leclerc? Do you think that's a product of the weather or the boat's pushing or both? What do you think?
If you have the good weather or the same weather compared to Armel, for sure, I think the boat today are faster. That's sure.
If you were doing the Vendée Globe with 2 weeks to go, what are you thinking about the most? The preparedness of the boat, the weather, trying to rest? What would the next 2 weeks look like for you as a sailor?
Now there is only things to do is to rest and to take good times and to start with a very good mentality and to trust all what you do and to be really cool and very well organized on board to be able to arrive and to take your mark in this race and to be able to have a good and to manage everything well. The boats, the start of the boat, and we realize also that it's not necessary to do a big gap in the first week to be able to do a final good result.
Pascal, thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, and I'm sure you feel the same. Good luck to all the guys and girls that are headed out in the Vendée Globe here in the coming weeks.
Thank you, my friend.
So there you have it. Some great insights from some very knowledgeable voices, giving us a real flavor of this event. Hopefully this has whet the appetite to delve deeper into this race with Norse Sails. Join me next time when we speak to some of the sail designers and team managers at the heart of powering these boats and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. The innovators and masters of speed supporting the sailors as they set out on their journey. Stay tuned and catch you soon. And once again, this is not Ken Reed.